Hello and welcome to Story Wala. The alarm went off at its usual time, 6 in the morning, and my wife Sandra and I got up to start our day. As I sat on the edge of the bed and let my feet fall to the floor, an audible groan escaped. "What's up? You sound like an old man," she joked as she headed to the bathroom, feeling like an old man after the events of the previous night. I heard her laughter echoing from the bathroom as she remembered our passionate love encounter. The night had concluded with a particularly sensual act. Today marked the start of her week-long business trip, leaving me alone at home, a prospect I wasn't eagerly anticipating. The sound of the shower running tempted me to join her, but memories of the previous night's efforts convinced me otherwise. When she returned to the bedroom, her mood was optimistic, contrasting with my state of self-pity. She encouraged me to get up and start the day, saying, "Come on, old man, get up and get going. We need 2 breadwinners to pay the mortgage on this place." With a nod, I responded, "Okay, I'm moving," and stumbled to the bathroom to start my morning routine. Later, we met downstairs for breakfast before she left for the airport, and I headed to work. Sandra is a lawyer, and I work at a medium-sized manufacturing plant in San Luis. She specializes in negotiations and travels with teams outside the plant. This trip involved negotiating a new subcontract with a major aerospace company in Denver. She traveled several times a year for similar negotiations, normally being away at least a week each time. At 35 years old, she graduated with honors from the State University 12 years ago, with a height of about 6'2" and a weight of 56 kg. I am Jack Fillmore, 37 years old, and I work as an engineer in the same company as my wife, with a height of 6'1" and a weight of 75 kg. I exercise to stay in shape, and we both enjoy playing golf, often forming a foursome with friends we met at a company picnic. It was love at first sight for me, and it seemed the same for her, since after a whirlwind courtship, we got married 6 months later. We have been married for 7 years, and we bought the house we lived in 3 months ago. It was the home where we planned to start our family, and Sandra was going to stop taking birth control pills when we returned from this trip. We were excited to have a family, and she intended to be a housewife until the children started school. Our parents, who lived in the area, were also anticipating the expansion of our family. After breakfast, I loaded Sandra's travel bag into her car and kissed her goodbye. Tears welled up in her eyes when she got into her car to leave. I expressed my hope that soon I wouldn't be traveling, so I wouldn't have to go through these goodbyes. She shared her dislike of goodbyes, and I reassured her that I felt the same. I mentioned that I would see her on Friday morning and we could order takeout so I could rest. She agreed, saying, "Sounds good, goodbye," as I watched her back out of the garage and onto the street, waving my arms as she left. I lumbered into the house to complete my preparations to leave for the night. At the office, when I got to work, I went up to the engineering department. I grabbed a cup of coffee in the break room and headed to my desk. I was just getting settled in when my phone rang. I identified myself as Fillmore, and my boss, Evan, asked me to come to his office. I accepted, took my coffee, and headed to his office. Evan mentioned that he remembered I mentioned last Friday that Sandra would be traveling this week. Then I was presented with an opportunity. Hill Hawkins, our field service engineer in California, was sick and unable to handle a problem that a customer in San Jose had with one of our models. Given my experience with that model, Evan asked me if I would like to go to San Jose and take a look. I agreed, saying that there wasn't much going on in the office and that I was alone this week. Evan instructed me to ask Katie to organize my reservations and tickets and to call the client to let him know I was coming and find out what the problem was. Feeling more excited about life, I stopped by Katie's desk, the secretary, and informed her about my flight and my reservation needs. Later, from my desk, I called the client to understand his problem before going home to pack my suitcase. On the way home, a plan formed in my mind. If I finished quickly, I could surprise my wife with a stop in Denver on the way home. The idea of spending a couple of days with her in Denver was becoming more and more exciting. As I waited for my flight at the airport, I tried to call Sandra's cell phone, but she didn't answer. So I left a voicemail indicating that I would be staying at my parents' house for a couple of days, and she was able to communicate with me on my cell phone during the nights. Everything went well. I was at the client site on Tuesday morning, made the necessary adjustments to the equipment, and checked it to make sure it was working satisfactorily. In the afternoon, when I returned to the hotel, I called the airline to make sure they were making progress. But I was tired and planned a quiet afternoon in my hotel room. We said goodbye with expressions of love. After eating, I boarded my flight at 9:45 at night. I checked in at the reception of Sandra's hotel, and after verifying my identity, they provided me with a card to enter her suite. I entered her suite silently, noticing a lamp illuminating the computer table with her laptop on it. Closed. However, there was no sign of Sandra. I left my suitcase and checked the bedroom and the bathroom, finding them empty. I thought she probably hadn't returned to her room yet. I decided to sit and wait, or maybe go down and check the living room to see if she was there. Then I noticed that the door to the next room was slightly open. I approached, and the door opened silently on well-lubricated hinges. Examining the living room in the adjoining suite, I found no one. Perplexed, I entered the room and heard a moan coming from the bedroom. My insides tightened, and I began to sweat as I crept closer to the bedroom door. Although my heart may not have stopped beating, my breath certainly did as I witnessed the scene in the barely lit room. Sandra was naked in front of me, occupied with a man whose face remained hidden. My initial impulse was to go in and confront her and the man, but reason prevailed over my emotions. Slowly backing away from the door, I returned to her suite. Taking out the digital camera from my travel bag, intended to take souvenir photos, I returned to the door of the other room. I turned off the flash and adjusted the camera for photos in low light. Calmly, I captured several images of the bed scene without them realizing. They were so absorbed in their activities that they kept their eyes closed without noticing their surroundings. Before returning to my suite, I examined an open briefcase on the table, finding a presentation card with the name of Sam Harris, the main negotiator of our company. I put the card in my pocket. Back in her suite, I used a computer camera interface cable that I had with me to connect the camera to her laptop. As our laptops had the same photo program, I easily downloaded an image from my camera and set it as wallpaper on her desktop. Then I put my camera in my travel bag and left her suite in silence. Before leaving, I heard her scream in ecstasy. I almost collapsed at that moment, but I continued towards the elevator. After returning the entry card at the reception, I contacted the airline to ask about the next flight back to St. Louis. Fortunately, there was a flight available at 6:30 in the morning, which promised to arrive home at 9:30 in the morning. With some luck, I calculated that this would coincide with the moment when Sandra would open her laptop at the negotiation table. Then, she would realize that she had been discovered, signaling the end of our marriage. Upon returning to the airport, I checked into a nearby hotel where sleep eluded me. I kept replaying the distressing scene in her hotel room. I cried, allowing my pain to manifest in tears. By the time I left the hotel at 5 a.m., I had exhausted my tears, determined to end our marriage. Quickly upon arriving in San Luis, my cell phone started ringing. When I got into my car, checking the caller ID, I saw that it was Sandra. I turned it off and headed home. Upon entering the house, the phone was ringing, but when I checked the caller ID, I discovered that it was Sandra again. I let it go to the answering machine and heard her sobbing on the phone, begging me to call her immediately, expressing that it was important. I ignored her tearful plea. I changed my clothes, rented a moving truck, and returned home to start packing. If my calculations were correct, she would arrive around 4 p.m., and my goal was to be out of the house by then. It took a couple of hours, but I managed to move all my personal belongings into a rental storage unit. Before packing my bags, I contacted Ed, our lawyer, and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. After unloading my belongings into the storage unit, I met with our lawyer and requested the start of divorce proceedings. Although I was tempted to cite infidelity as the cause, I opted for incompatibility, reserving the accusation of infidelity in case she contested the divorce. I also asked him to draft a new will designating my brother as the beneficiary. I made a stop at the bank, moved half of our savings and checking balance to new accounts only in my name. I subsequently contacted my investment advisor to make a similar transfer for our accounts with him. With a heavy heart, I drove to my parents' house, carrying my suitcase with me. I entered through the open door, and my mother, seeing me first, exclaimed loudly, "Hi, Jack, where have you been? Sandra has been calling here several times looking for you." I informed her that I would be staying there. My retired father joined us, and I sat down to explain everything to them. They were shocked when I revealed Sandra's infidelity and the end of our marriage. I asked if I could stay with them for a few days until we found a furnished apartment, and they agreed. My calculations seemed quite accurate because around 6 in the afternoon, while we were sitting down to eat, the doorbell rang. My dad answered, and a moment later, he came in with Sandra, visibly distressed. He questioned why I had not responded to his calls, expressing the need to talk. He had not realized that I had moved all my things out of the house and assumed that the message I left on my desk did not provide all the necessary information. I responded by expressing my fear that it was her and suggesting that we go somewhere to talk. I firmly stated that I was no longer her husband and that I had nothing to talk about. The divorce proceedings had already begun, and anything that needed to be communicated could be done through our lawyers. I explained that what I witnessed in Denver had destroyed any feeling I had for her, and I asked her to leave so I could finish my dinner. She pleaded and reiterated that there was nothing to talk about without addressing fidelity. I mentioned that I had photographs and that I planned to confront her lover, Sam, the next day. She cried and insisted on talking. I responded by suggesting she leave as my dinner was getting cold. I suggested she write me a letter articulating how she could justify breaking her wedding vows. I figured, as a smart lawyer, she could explain how it was all my fault and that she could still love and respect me a lot. With a sob, she turned around before reaching the door. She turned to look and begged again. I said goodbye, and after she left, my parents remained stunned. My mother commented on the harshness of my response. I responded by sharing the harsh reality of her actions and my inability to trust her again. I questioned whether she wanted me to give her grandchildren to a woman like that. My dad suggested that over time, my perspective might change. I responded by expressing doubt and suggesting we talk about something else to be able to digest my food. That Monday morning, when I left the house, I felt bad for myself having to leave Jack, but I thought how wonderful it would be when he returned and we could start our family. We had waited so long to make sure we were financially and professionally ready to start parenting. Now, everything was almost ready. The trip to Denver was uneventful. I sat next to Sam Harris, our lead negotiator, and we briefly discussed the upcoming negotiations and our families. Sam, who had been married for 20 years with 2 children in high school, knew that she planned to stop working when she became pregnant and expressed that she would miss me. Sam and I were a negotiation team since before my marriage, and we had a comfortable relationship. The other 2 members of the team were talking behind us. When we arrived at the hotel in Denver, we checked into our rooms, with Sam and I opting for adjoining rooms as usual, originally intended for late-night strategy sessions. This arrangement evolved about 10 years ago when our relationship took a physical turn. We convinced ourselves it was a stress relief mechanism after challenging negotiations, and at that time, we considered that it was not infidelity if it contributed to our professional collaboration. After Jack and I got married, I abstained for a couple of years due to guilt. However, during a particularly demanding negotiation, Sam proposed resuming our arrangement to alleviate the stress, and I reluctantly accepted. It became a habit again, with the thrill of the secret increasing my at-home benefiting Jack and decreasing my guilt. On the first night of this trip, we did not meet. Since I was feeling tired after dinner, however, after the first day of negotiations, I agreed to meet with him the next night. The next morning, when I opened my laptop, I was shocked by what I saw on the screen. Sam, sitting next to me, quickly closed the lid, and we took the computer to the hallway. Furious, demanding to know what kind of content I had on my desktop. I replied that I didn't know, and explained that it wasn't there the last time I used it. Still in shock, I suggested checking it again. Upon opening it again, we both looked at the image, and Sam exclaimed that it was me. I asked how it could be me, but he insisted, adding that it was probably the one under me, although you couldn't see my face. He asked if I had left the laptop unattended at some point the previous day. I denied it, saying that I always had it with me during the trip and in my room while I was in his. I wondered if someone could have accessed his room with a camera, but he didn't believe it, saying the door was closed and he assumed it was locked. I advised him to go back to the hotel and check if it had been given to him to access someone's room the night before. Let's assure him that Jack had asked me to call his cell phone, concerned about the situation. He mentioned that he didn't like the sound of it since Jack could have been anywhere. During their conversation, he told me to call his cell phone if I discovered something and urged him to do his best to handle the repercussions of this. I told him to take a taxi back to the hotel and said goodbye, feeling anxious. I considered the possibility that Jack had taken the photo and placed it on my laptop. It seemed like a message that our marriage had ended. I needed to return to the hotel to gather information. The receptionist organized a taxi, and 15 minutes later, I was back, checking the reception to see if anyone had entered my suite. The employee confirmed that a certain Jack Fillmore had received a card at 9:45 the night before and returned half an hour later. At that moment, I knew my marriage was probably over. The man I loved more than anything had disappeared. Despite the heartbreak I felt, the need to fight for him as he entered my suite, I tried to contact him on his cell phone and at work. There was no response. His cell phone was turned off. After leaving an important voicemail with his secretary, he called me back soon. His secretary informed me that he was on a business trip in California and he was expected back tomorrow. That was it. He had gone to California and had stopped on his way back to surprise me. I guess we were both surprised. I called his parents. They hadn't seen him for several days. I asked them to call me, but there was no answer at home. I also left a message there alone. In the end, I cried, realizing I had no way to talk to him unless I came home. So I picked up the phone, made reservations for the next flight to St. Louis, and after packing my suitcase, I informed Sam of the situation. He remained silent before speaking. Sam mentioned that it seemed like we were both facing divorce or worse. He pointed out the company policy against fraternization of management employees, highlighting the potential risk of both of us being fired, which was not known. He would look good in our records, expressed concern about losing Jack, and acknowledged that losing his family would also be bad. Sam advised me to return to St. Louis and find Jack, urging me to talk to him before he did anything. Sam mentioned he would let me know how everything was going, and he explained that he had to stay there until the negotiations were over. He assured me that he would be waiting to hear from me. We said goodbye. I picked up my bag and my laptop, hurried to the lobby, checked out, and took the hotel taxi to the airport, praying all the way. Back in St. Louis, I hoped I could make Jack listen to me. I had to explain to him that it was just closeness and that it didn't affect him at all. I had to risk being rational about my infidelity and accepting it for what it was, nothing more than meaningless closeness when I got home. At first, nothing seemed out of place. However, upon entering our bedroom and finding all his belongings missing, I realized that he knew and he had left me. I had to find him. After many fruitless phone calls, I decided to go to his parents' house to see if he was there or if they had any idea where he was. He was at his parents' house, and the reception I received from him made me feel nauseous because of his brutal lack of sensitivity. He informed me that he was in the process of getting a divorce. I didn't feel like talking, and nothing I could say would change his mind. After sarcastically suggesting that I write a long letter explaining my position, I left and sat in my car, crying. The family we had planned would never happen. Growing old together and enjoying grandchildren together seemed like an unattainable dream. From a selfish point of view, what saddened me even more was the thought that when I found another husband, I might be too old to conceive. Eventually, I started the car and returned to our empty house. Jack, after a restless night haunted by visions of Sandra and Sam together, I got up early and went down to my parents' house. I made coffee, took out my laptop and my camera, and proceeded to download the photos from the camera to the computer with the intention of identifying Sam. When examining the images, Sam's face was still little Clara. However, I noticed something on her right arm that extended towards Sandra's chest. Upon closer inspection, I identified a tattoo, a heart with the word Marie on it. Sam's wife was Marie. That was all I needed. I came back upstairs, showered, and got ready for work. When my mom came down, I was making breakfast. Later at work, I burned a couple of CDs with the photos I had taken and an enlargement of Sam's tattoo. I printed out several sets and organized them in a folder before heading to our human resources department. I requested to see the manager, Pil, whom I knew from golf outings. Placing a set of photos in front of him, I explained that the images might seem inappropriate, but that they represented my wife and Sam Harris. The date and time on them confirmed that they were taken on Tuesday night in the suite of the Salmon Denver Hotel during a company negotiating trip. Pil seemed visibly surprised and asked what he could do. I responded by suggesting that he could fire both of them for cause under the anti-fraternization clause in his contract with the company. I noted that this clause had never been applied before and questioned whether I was sure to follow this course of action. I mentioned that this would bring the matter of infidelity to light and assumed that I was considering divorcing Sandra over the matter. I informed him that I already had my lawyer drafting the documents. But if I chose not to go ahead, I would file a lawsuit against the company. Pil agreed, stating that he would take the matter to the legal department and get the ball rolling. Then he urged me to continue with the next point of discussion. I entered to see my boss, Evan, and informed him of the situation. He was suitably horrified by what I had to tell him about my wife and Sam Harris. When I requested the rest of the week as vacation time, he agreed immediately. As we said goodbye, he congratulated me on a job well done. During my trip to California, the customer praised the quick resolution of his issue and asked if I would consider taking over the California territory given the field engineer's current retirement due to health issues. I mentioned I would consider it and give a response upon returning to the work the following week. As I left Evan's office, Katie, his secretary, informed me that my wife had been looking for me and would return later. I instructed Katia to under no circumstances allow my wife to see me and expressed that there was a significant problem since we were getting a divorce and she and Sam Harris were involved. I anticipated the news would spread throughout the plant at noon, considering Katie's penchant for gossip. Upon returning to my desk, I called Marie, Sam's wife, whom I knew from school picnics. Knowing that my disclosures about our partners could be difficult for her, I contacted Marie and explained the situation, expressing the need to talk as soon as possible. She agreed to meet, and we agreed that I would visit her in 15 minutes. Upon arrival at the Harris house, I felt a sense of fear as I revealed the situation to Marie and her family. However, I believed that Sam should face the consequences, and Sandra should not bear the full weight of the repercussions. Marie welcomed me, offering me coffee, which I accepted, and I decided to get straight to the point. I revealed the affair between Sam and Sandra, my pursuit of a divorce from Sandra, and my decision to fire them both from their jobs. I mentioned that the information would soon become public knowledge and offered to show her photos as evidence. looking at her face, I was surprised by the lack of a significant reaction. Mary shared that she had suspected Sam's infidelity during company trips for years, but hoped it wasn't true, while acknowledging Sam's previous role as a loving husband and father. Mari expressed her regret for both my marriage and her own situation, considering the possibility of Sam being fired and the challenges she might face in finding another well-paying job. I ended up offering her the set of photographs if she wanted them. Mari expressed gratitude for sharing the photographs, stating that she would leave them so she could look at them later. Gathering my strength, I apologized, explaining that I couldn't let the situation go, especially considering that Sandra and I were on the verge of starting a family. I highlighted trust and respect in a relationship, qualities that I believed the mother of our children should possess. She recognized my decision and thanked me for informing her directly, expressing understanding about not wanting to find out first from other sources. Mari extended her sympathy for my situation with Sandra, wanting it to be a one-time incident, finding it easier to forgive. But she believed it had been going on for years, which made it harder to accept. Now that it was exposed, Mari emphasized her pride and the need to keep my head up, in addition to offering me help in whatever way. Let's make sure of my parents. It has been 6 months since I started the divorce process. I received my copy of the agreement that dissolved my marriage with Sandra this morning. I never spoke to her or saw her again after the time she came to my parents' house. Needless to say, she never wrote me the letter, which would have given me a good few hours of laughter. My lawyer took care of everything. I gave her the mortgaged house with the furniture, which was highly financed, to release all claims on me. I also had my name removed from the mortgage. She took full responsibility for making the payments. Of course, without a job, she had to put it up for sale and lost a lot of money in the deal. She tried to contest the divorce, but threatened to change the reason for the divorce to infidelity and publish the photos of her and Sam on the internet if she did not sign the documents within 48 hours. She signed them within the required time, and that is why today I am a free man. I guess she decided she didn't love me that much anyway. She was fired from her job, but she is a smart lawyer and negotiator. So she found another one in a month, not earning as much or with the benefits that seniority brought her at her old job. But I heard that he manages and is dating again. Good luck to my boyfriend. I wonder if he has told him about our divorce and the reason. I think someone should alert him. Marie divorced Sam, and it destroyed him financially. He found another job too after being fired, but he is struggling to make alimony and child support payments on his new salary. I now live in Santa Maria, California, a quiet place near the coast, about halfway between the Bay Area and Los Angeles. This positions me pretty well for covering both the southern and northern parts of the state. I moved here about 4 months ago and have an apartment in a complex with other singles and young couples, most of them trying to save money for a down payment on a house. Housing costs are high here, and it takes a lot of dollars to enter the market. I have a steady girlfriend who lives in the same complex. She is divorced like me, but we are comfortable together, and I think we will see how it goes in the future with me traveling so much. I really need to trust the person I marry, but I need to make a decision before it's too late if we want to start a family. The biological clocks keep ticking. With this, the story concludes, where the wife and her spouse receive what they deserve. I know that some expected something more brutal, but the economy and work can also affect people a lot. On the one hand, we have Sandra, who lost a lot in the divorce. In addition, time is ticking, and it is difficult for her to start a family now. And have a little more respect for her husband. If she had been a faithful wife today, she would have a happy life with a man like Jack. As for Sam, I think it is obvious that alimony and child support are a good punishment. It took him a long time to recover from that financial blow, and he practically didn't have to do anything. Just present the evidence to his wife. If you found this story interesting, leave a like. Also, tell us in the comments what things you would improve and what things you didn't like. And don't forget to subscribe to receive alerts for new videos.